Well, g'day fishers. Friday morning, which means it's fishery report time. Glamour weather during the week, absolute glamour, especially Thursday, 27 degrees, bring that on. This weekend looks like a little bit of a, unfortunately, not as good. Saturday, still got those sou'easters hanging around, although they're not going to be too strong from the forecast, 10 to 15 knots, which is not too bad. But Sunday looks like your better day, and then next week looks glamour again, always during the week, but that suits me fine. Don't mind having a day off during the week. So what's been happening this week? Well, the water in the bay's warmed up. I actually snuck out on Thursday morning for a quick flatty bash, and it's around hovering between 17 and 18 degrees, which is unreal. So it has started to stir the flatties up. I went up the back half of the bay, namely Tilligary Creek, and found a few nice lizards up that way. A little bit of slimeweed or winterweed still up there, but if you can avoid that, there are some really, really nice flatties up Tilligary, especially if you fish that run-out tide. I sort of got that back end of the run-out tide really early and got some nice fish just aiming up on the edge of the racks and fishing those little channels that run off the gutters and things like that, those mud gutters. Just find a little bit of structure, a little bit of current, a little bit of bait, and the fish were there. Notably, trying some new lures out, those Cast Prodigies in the 4.1 inch, they performed unbelievably well yesterday. I used some other lures, but these guys in the chartreuse and the black and gold just killed it for me yesterday. We caught over 20 fish, up to 70 centimetres, so the fishing yesterday was sensational. So definitely recommend getting out on the flatties at the moment. A few dewies in the bay as well. I know there's a couple caught down behind Fame Cove and obviously Middle Island there. I spoke to John, he got a couple on the vibes, did pretty well there. So the back half of the moon now, those tides are smaller compared to last weekend when we had that big moon, and those big tides makes it hard fishing in the bay, that's for sure. So some dewies around with that water temperature spiking, plenty of bait in the bay. Speaking of bait, yep, longtails are still there. Mac tuna are mixed in with them. They've been a little bit cagey. I know a few anglers that went out during the week and said they were a little bit stressed out. A lot of boats starting to get on them. But there's a lot of guys throwing bigger baits versus that smaller bait which we're feeding on. So you just got to match the hatch with those longtails and Mac tuna. So, but still good fun. But don't rev up on those fish. You've just got to be really, really patient and wait for a school to come to you. It's a matter of mind over matter of being that patient fisherman, that's for sure. Back down towards the lower half of the bay into Shoal Bay, there's plenty of bait down in there. Now, you'll see that sanctuary zone, obviously, that runs out off Little Beach there. When that tide rips out there's been salmon and tailor, but you've got to make sure that you're not in that sanctuary zone. So once they rip around the corner into Shoal Bay, you can go your hardest at them, but just make sure you're not in that sanctuary zone there. A few squid turning up in Shoal Bay, finally. Water's clear enough, plenty of cuttlefish in there, but you just got to use those smaller jigs. We do have some new squid jigs that have just arrived as well. So those new long casts from Flash Boost, they look sensational. They'll be really good on the squid there in Shoal Bay. So that's a wrap up in the bay. Still a few bream about. I wouldn't say they're hitting their straps and just waiting for that water to warm up and they'll start hitting surfaces. Or they do during the winter. I know some guys that do chasing during the winter, but I know when that water warms up, they get a little bit more aggressive. Young KO's been throwing grubs down the marina there, getting some really nice fish up to 35 centimetres, so doing pretty well there. The Ludrick is still hanging in there. For those guys that are keen on doing that, the Ludrick is still there. But if you're keen, go and take a rock and away you go down on the break wall. So some good fishing in the bay, and I think Saturday will be a bay day, that's for sure. Now moving on to the beaches and the rocks, a couple of nice dew caught during the week. Had reports of fish up to 15 kilos coming in from Middle Rock, also down at Barooby Beach as well. So a few nice dew on the beaches. The water temperature on the beach fluctuating at the moment. I think when we get that sou'easter, it'll actually warm it up a little bit. There's some 19, 20 degree water out further, which will push in hopefully into the beaches. Might stir a few fish up. We might get some early season whiting on the beach as well. Even though we're just into spring, you will catch a couple of whiting on the beach. You just have to be patient and work through them, although the bream are probably going to be your better option. And obviously the tailor and salmon on the beaches at the moment. So give that a crack. There might be a few flatties up the spit at Fingal. Be worth throwing some plastics out, some natural coloured plastics. Definitely up that way. Or if you want to throw a brine pilly in, slow roll it, you might find a few flatties, as long as that swell doesn't pick up. So I don't think it should. We'll see how we go the weekend. Sunday being a better option, that's for sure. So on the rocks, a few drummer around. They've been a little bit quiet the last couple of weeks, so that swell definitely stirred them up. There were some good snapper off the rocks as well, so especially down towards Boat Harbour there. That swell got up last weekend. I know a few boys that threw a few baits in the washers, got some nice fish, 2-3 kilos. So a few reds around, if that swell picks up, definitely worth a shot on those. Now that we're back off the full moon, I think it'd be good for a snapper off the rocks. You can always go and spin tailor salmon, and the odd bonito still about off the rocks. Crazy season this year, so you can still go and do that off the rocks at the moment. Now, on the offshore scene, some really good snapper caught this week, but in that deeper water, 40 to 50 metres. I spoke to Paul. He's been catching some really nice fish in that 40 to 50 metre range. If he can pick the weather, he's been picking those days where there's less wind and obviously looking at less current and just throwing those bigger plastics out, heavier jig heads, just let them flood it out. He's getting smashed on them. And then running one of those buku or catchy style jigs in the rod holder, letting Rodney rod holder do all the work. So getting some nice fish there. It's been the odd trag around as well. I know down off your rally has been off the odd trag down there. So it's, like I said, funny season. That water's about 19 degrees. So definitely worth trying to find a few trag. I think you're going to work for them, but it might be worth a shot finding a few trag. And there are some kings around at the moment. We're getting into that springtime where we do find a couple of bigger kings on the inshore reefs and right in those shallows. If you're keen on stick baiting now, now is the time. Find that springtime, September, October, even November, before those nor'easters get too hard and turn that water over and make it green and cold. I think now's the time if you want to go and stick bait a big kingy. Now is the time. We've got some new stick baits there, a lot to report. A lot of new stick baits arrived this week, which will be really good for our scene here in Port Stephens. Anyway, so that's a report this week. Some still good fish around at the moment. The flatties are starting to fire up the bay, which I enjoy. So give that a crack. Anyway, until next week, enjoy your weekend.